Continuing from the first passage, let's go to the second passage, right? Again, you should spend only about 2.5 minutes, maybe 2 to 2.5 minutes within or for the understanding of the passage. And let's see if I can do this, right? Or let's see if we can do this. So here we go. Let's get started. This passage is adapted from article Virtually Built: A Rune Yields Secrets by Sam Lubell in 2002. Everyone knows that Roman Colosseum is an architectural marvel. So you know that. And then we have something here. It says in the very part, by reconstructing the building with three-dimensional computer modeling and then virtually walking through it, researchers have discovered dark, narrow upper hallways that probably hemmed in spectators, slowing their movement to a crawl. All right. So again, they had this reconstructing of the building in the 3D. Such 3D dimensional modeling is turning some of the archaeologists' once established truth on their head. So meaning they're changing. And then it says the Colosseum, a vast 4-story oval arena, was built from around AD 70 to AD 80. All right, so when was it built? The history of it. Dean Abernathy, a doctoral student who helped reconstruct the Colosseum, confronted the issue of the third-level hallways. So we don't know what about the third-level hallways, but third-level hallways. Bernard Fischer, a classics professor at UCLA and director of its Cultural Virtual Reality Lab, said that researchers have generally held that the entire Colosseum was a masterpiece of the circulation, with people about to enter and leave it as little as 10 minutes. So that's what it was thought to be. And such reconstructions have challenged traditional thinking about other sites as well. So other sites as well, meaning not just the Colosseum, but other places. Samuel Paley, a classics professor at State University of New York in Buffalo, and members of the Virtual Reality Lab, they have worked with the design company that specializes in archaeological visualization to produce virtual models of several Assyrian palaces. So other places are like Assyrian palaces. And some experts hesitate to rely on such modeling, saying that it can gloss over the realities of the past. So some of them don't really like it. Even Fischer and other scholars who have embraced interactive 3D modeling caution that their reconstruction can never be accepted as fact, partly because new information is always surfacing. So even the people who have made it think that it's not true. And then not really reliable that much, right? And then it says Fikret Yigal, a professor at the agricultural history at the University of California at Santa Barbara, acknowledges that computer modeling can shed new light on the past. So again, they go back and say, yeah, it can shed new light. That just took me about 2.5 minutes, or less than 2.5 minutes, about 2 minutes tops, right? So you see how we haven't read the entire thing, but you know it's about 3D computer modeling and how it has an impact on the archaeological studies, right? And some are saying that it's not really good, but at least they go back and say it's going to shed a new light on the subject matter, right? So you get the idea, right? It should give you a good idea. It's not just about Colosseum. It's not just about that part of the archaeological discovery or archaeological construction, but we're actually talking about the 3D modeling of it all. All right. So 2.5 minutes. We spend 2 minutes to understand that. Let's go to the question. Right? The main function of the first paragraph. I mean, you should already know, right? It says Colosseum, right? The Colosseum was this kind of whatever. And then there were like 3 modeling of it, shows different the views on it. So is it state then question a widely held notion about Colosseum? Or is it praise the Colosseum as an architectural and engineering marvel? Or show how people in ancient times moved quickly and out of the Colosseum? Or point out the flaw in the design and construction of the Colosseum and how it was later corrected? What should be your answer then, right? The simple answer should be A, right? Why is that? Because this is not it. We're not really pointing out the flaw in the design. That's not the goal of the 3D modeling. Or is it show how people ancient times moved quickly and out of the Colosseum? I don't think so. That's not the idea. Praise the Colosseum as architectural and engineering marvel? Not really. But what we're saying is state then question a widely held notion about the Colosseum, right? What is that? Again, to check our answer. So it says everyone knows that Roman Colosseum is architectural marvel. Or is it by reconstructing the building with 3-dimensional computer modeling, then virtually walking through it, researchers have discovered dark, narrow upper hallways that probably hemmed in spectators, slowing their movement to the crawl, right? So upper dark hallways were like, not so good because they had to crawl down. It's not as, it was not as innovative as we thought it was, right? So that's the idea. You should know this because here it says it was an architectural marvel, but then here it says by reconstructing, we know that they were probably hemmed in dark, in spectators slowing their movement to a crawl. So therefore, it's not as what we thought of it was, all right? So therefore, the answer has to be A. See? Took you like 30 seconds. 12. The passage indicates that its research on the Colosseum, the UCLA assembled team of Roman architecture experts made use of all of the following sources except for this one, right? So you should already know, or you should at least know what they have been using, right? Is it the remains of the part of the Colosseum usually inaccessible to the researchers? Records of the Colosseum's construction and expansions, studies of amphitheaters similar to the Colosseum, are models of the Colosseum made from clay. Now remember, we're talking about the 3D modeling, right? 3D modeling. Let me just go back, all right? If it's 3D modeling, right? I mean, you should already know what kind of things that you need to create the 3D modeling of such, right? So not that. So it says UCLA right there, right? So Reality Lab, we read that there. So after touring the virtual Colosseum, now he's not so sure. Most scholars just never focus on the problem of circulation of building. He said, blah, 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 blah. It's a challenge because analysis of the UCLA model suggests that the Roman Senate may have been poorly ventilated and lighted, and the inferior acoustics. The models also raise some new questions about the Temple of the Saturn, whose design may have been altered centuries after its constructions. Samuel Paley, blah, blah, blah. They had this ideas and that ideas and so on and on and on and on. So think about one thing, right? One thing that you wouldn't, think about one thing that you wouldn't use in the 3D modeling of such places, right? First of all, you need to know where to go, right? First of all, you need to have the places to, or access to all the places, access to all the little different places so that you have the 3D modeling going, right? Records, you need the records of construction and expansion because you do this based on the blueprint of the Colosseum, and studies of amphitheaters similar to the Colosseums. Of course, you should do that. But one thing that you don't do is make models of the Colosseum made from the clay. It's got nothing to do with the 3D. It's after the 3D modeling that you can make this, right? Because that's what we want to do. We want to see all the different areas of that, right? So your answer should be models of the Colosseum made from clay. This should take you a little bit of time, maybe a minute or maximum minute and a half, right? Okay, moving on to 13. Frischter attributes the theory that the entire Colosseum was a masterpiece of circulation directly to do what? We read that part. I mean, it would be surprising, but we already read that part, 35 to whatever, says Myrna Fisher, a classics professor at UCLA and the director of its Cultural Virtual Reality Lab, says that the researchers have generally held that the entire Colosseum was a masterpiece of circulation, right? With people able to enter and leave as little as 10 minutes. That's something that we read. So based on what we read, right? What can we say? Directly to do what? Flawed experiments yielding incorrect results, misleading computer models, erroneous data about the building's bottom floor, or false assumption left unquestioned by most scholars. You should already know that D should be your answer, right? That's a false assumption because after making a 3D model, it didn't look that way, right? That's what they're saying. So therefore, that should be your answer. Simple as that, right? Should have taken you less than a minute to solve, maybe 45 seconds at best, right? Go to 14. The author describes the Roman Senate and the Temple of Saturn as two buildings that what, right? So you've already seen this, you've already read this by when you were reading, trying to find some of the answers for some of the other ideas, but we know that. But let's try to guess for ourselves, right? The author describes the Roman Senate and the Temple of Saturn, right, as two buildings that what? Have yet to be studied by UCLA researchers, are being reevaluated thanks to the computer modeling, underwent design changes long after the constructions, or featured inferior ventilation, lighting, and acoustics, right? So if that doesn't make any sense, let's go to Roman Senate and Temple Saturn, right? We found that right there, or at least we read it down here. So analysis of the UCLA model suggests that the Roman Senate may have been poorly ventilated and lighted and had inferior acoustics. The models also raise some new questions about the Temple of Saturn, whose design may have been altered centuries after its reconstruction, right? So therefore, when we say something about the Roman Senate and the Temple of Saturn, are we saying it's yet to be studied by UCLA researchers? No, it's been studied already. Are being reevaluated thanks to the computer modeling? Yes, pretty much. Underwent design changes long after the construction? That was Temple Saturn. Featured inferior ventilation, lighting, acoustics? That's Roman Senate. So therefore, you're left with G as your answer, right? Simple as that. So that should be your answer because you already know, you can guess from that, right? The reason why these two come up as descriptions is because they want to show you that it's not just Colosseum after the 3D modeling have been found to have some kind of a flaw in designing, but also the Roman Senate and the Temple of Saturn as well. You get the idea, right? I'm hoping that you're getting this. Let's go to 15 as quick as possible. Now, so far we've been taking just a few minutes for all these say 4 questions and the passage itself, right? So I would say approximately we're into about 10 minutes of the video, which means we've spent about half the time, 5 minutes, in solving the 4 questions and at least the passage itself, right? So you have 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19, and 20, which is about 6 questions left, and you have about 3 to 4 minutes, I would have to say, because I mean, despite the fact that we said about 5 minutes, I don't think it was about 5 minutes, but less than 5 minutes, right? So let's take a look at this. 15. As Paley relates it, the lecture audience's reaction to his finding about an Assyrian palace is best described as what, right? So you've seen that Assyrian palace. Now, of course, you have to go back a little bit right here, Assyrian palaces. It says, we have read that it says, members of the Virtual Reality Lab have worked in a design company that specializes in archaeological visualization to produce several Assyrian palaces. We read that. Now let's go on and say, moving through a simulation of the northwest palace of the Assur-Nasir-Pal II of Assyria, an ancient site in modern-day Iraq, he caught a glimpse of the 3-leaf bas-relief sculptures in a row. The sculptures, which depicted a ritual involving the king, courtiers, and of the protective gods, could be viewed as a single isolated tableau only from his position on the threshold of the throne room, as was evidently the intention of the palace's designers. When Paley described his findings at a lecture, the room went absolutely silent. He said, I think people realized right there and then that this is a useful technology that helps them see things in a different way. So they went absolutely silent, meaning they were dumbstruck, or they were struck, right? So stand amazement should be your answer right there. It should give you that answer right away, right? This should take you about a minute because you need to go back to the passage and read it once more, right? But it should take you no more than a minute, because I mean, contempt is wrong, right? Concern is wrong. Feigned interest is wrong, because after what you read, it has to be the stunned amazement, right? Simple as that. Moving on. 16. In the context of the 8th paragraph, lines 68 and 76, we know the 8th paragraph, or at least we don't know what an 8th paragraph is, but if you count the paragraphs, remember, you always have the booklet, right? You have the passages here and you have the questions here, most likely. So you should know when it says 8th paragraph, you can find it right there, right? From these paragraphs, you should be able to locate it right away. Now it says that the statement in lines 73 and 76 most nearly means what, right? So you will have to find that, 73 to 76. So 73 to 76 is right there, right? So some experts hesitate to rely on such modeling, right? We read that part already. And it says he added, so 73 to 76 or whatever, he added, those images, especially the stunning, seductive ones, convey as much or more about our own values and cultural aspirations as about the ancients. So if that's the idea, what are we saying, right? Is that computer models reveal a great deal about the values and the culture of the ancient world. Because they reflect modern ideas, computer models risk obscuring the ancient past. Modern people have aspirations similar to those of the people of the ancient world, or through their images, the ancient vividly convey their values and hopes. The answer have to be G, right? Why is that? Now remember, this sounds good, right? But what we read was, remember, the context of the 8th paragraph. What was the context of the 8th paragraph? We know that the context of the 8th paragraph, this paragraph, is negative, right? It says, some experts hesitate to rely on such modeling, saying that it can gloss over the realities of the past. So it's not good at all. And then when he says, those images, especially the stunning, seductive ones, convey as much or more about our own values and cultural aspirations as about the ancients. When he says this, right, it doesn't necessarily mean, for example, right, it doesn't necessarily mean that the computer models reveal a great deal about the values and the cultures of the ancient world. No, we're not talking about the computer models, but rather we're talking about the pictures that are on the walls of these temples and whatnots, right? Modern people have aspirations similar to those of the people of the ancient world. I don't think that's what he's talking about. Through their images, the ancient vividly convey their values and hopes. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is that because they reflect modern ideas, the pictures and whatever, computer models risk obscuring the ancient past, right? That's the negative part. That's the only negative part here. Everything else is kind of positive in saying that, yeah, this is great deal about, it reveals great deals about everything else. Modern people have aspirations similar to those of the ancient world. Through their images, the ancient vividly conveyed their values and hopes. That should be true, but the context of the 8th passage, 8th paragraph, says something about it's hesitate. Some people are hesitant to look at it that way. Some people are hesitant to use this computer modeling, right? Because they reflect modern ideas. Computer models risk obscuring the ancient past, although they do have that, sense of, revealing, all right? So the answer has to be G. This should take you a little bit longer, right? It should take you a little bit longer, like about a minute and a half at most, right? So try spending less time than you're supposed to use it, all right? 17. When Mark Wilson Jones talks about working the stuff out, and then he's most likely referring to what, right? 81. So you need to look at 81 right away. It's easy to like connect to 81, right? So we read this part of it, right? We read this part of it, and it says, we are working the stuff out, said Mark Wilson Jones, a member of the UCLA committee. Nothing ever final. One advantage of using digital models, scholars say, is that they can easily be updated with new findings. So meaning, when we're working stuff out, we're probably trying to, stabilize it. Correcting errors in computer models as new data emerges. Eliminating serious flaws in the software used to make computer models. Ending the conflict between supporters and the critics of the computer modeling, or is it integrating architecture and archaeology into classroom lectures? Definitely the answer have to be A, right? Correcting errors, that's what we want, that's what we read. So you need to correct the errors to the update it easily to when the new data shows up, or when the new data emerges. What you need to do is you need to submerge, or you need to divulge together, or you need to diverge it together so that you have the actual, corrected software, or you have the corrected model of the, or 3D model of the certain architecture, right? So that's the answer. Should have taken you about 30 seconds. All right, moving on. Number 18. The author most likely places the words walking through in quotation marks in line 6-2. Walking through, line 6, right? So we read, we probably haven't read that, but you know what that means, right? Because it's a 3D modeling, so 6 right there, walking through, right? So we read, we read it. What are the odds, right? So it says, by reconstructing the building with 3-dimensional computer modeling and then virtually walking through it, researchers have discovered dark, narrow alleyways or upper hallways that probably hemmed in the spectators and so on. So if that's the idea, right? What are we saying? So walking through, in quotation marks, places the words. Why? Why is that air quote, or why is that quoted, right? Meaning, revealing the speed at which the ancient Romans moved through the Colosseum upper hallways. No, we're not talking about that. Suggests that the tourist visit to the Colosseum is Rome are best done in a leisurely pace. No. Warns readers that researchers are just beginning to develop computer models of the Colosseum. Not really. State that researchers' tours of the reconstructed Colosseum are actually taken via computer. That's the right answer, right? That's what happens via computer. That's what they're walking in through. We're walking through the 3D models, right? You see the idea? It should have taken you 30 seconds or less than 30 seconds to solve this question. You see how simple it is? All right, let's move on to the next question. According to the passage, which of the following is true about the present state of Colosseum? So present state of Colosseum, now this is more of a background, or more of a sort of like an inference that you need to make. Is it as a result of earthquake? Little of the Colosseum's facade remains? Or is it impressively the Colosseum remains unaffected by the passage of time? Or is much of the Colosseum has been destroyed but a notable amount is still standing? Or is the Colosseum's facade remains intact but the rest of the structure has been destroyed? So which one of these? If you know it, it should be C already, right? Much of the Colosseum has been destroyed but a notable amount is still standing. If you've been there, much of it is destroyed, and even the facade of it. What's a facade, right? Colosseum does look like that, right? A big bowl, and you have the columns. I'm not drawing to scale, remember that. I'm not a good drawer, right? I'm not a good painter. So they have this, right? And this is what we call facade, and that's not even a Colosseum. Most of the facade here destroyed, right? Here, bits of destroyed. So you don't know, you don't have the full facade of it. So facade remains is wrong, right? So what happens is much of the Colosseum has already been destroyed, but a notable amount is still standing, meaning notable amount, like notable amount, and in there as well, right? Notable amounts of it is still standing, okay? I must tell you that it's not as grand, and it's not as, well, it's grand. It is very grand. I mean, thinking of it as a work that was done like thousands of years ago, it's a grand structure, but if you compare it to today's like sport complexes or stadiums, right? It's not as big, but it's quite a sight if you take a look at it, right? So that's the answer, right? It should take you less than it should be taking you a less than minute at least, right? Because you'd have some trouble finding these ideas, but if you think about it in the background sense, I mean, only C should make sense, right? It's not unaffected. No, it's affected by the passage of time, definitely. And this should be the only thing that sticks out as the answer. So this question, you might say, is what we call a background question, where you need to use your background knowledge to solve these questions. Or at least you can find them on the passage, but it will take you time, right? All right, last question. The passage mentions which of the following has a strength of using computer models in archaeology. You should be able to solve this without any question or without any, going back references. They cost relatively little to produce, or they can easily be updated with new findings, or they entertain and inform the public, or they encourage improvements in technology. Definitely, right? Why is that? Because new findings, it's the update that was important. Because, long time ago when they were trying to find the ideas, but the updating of such things was very difficult. But now all they have to do is send in the probe or whatever, right? Or you need to bring in the cameras and try to picture all of it, and then you can update little bits of that, bits of this and that and that. And maybe the stool that was there, they thought it was for the decoration, but actually was for something else. Those things you can find out because of the 3D modeling. You can look at it over and over and over again, right? So therefore the answer has to be G. Now, so far in the actual recording time, we've used 20 minutes. Okay, people, about 20 minutes now. That divided by half, or at least more than half, we should be able to cut safely to 8.5 minute mark for all the questions, because we haven't spent too much time in many of the questions, right? We only spend about hour and a half, a minute and a half, or maybe 2 minutes for a couple of questions only. Most of the questions should have taken you 20 or less than 20 seconds, right? So remember how we are trying to work this, right? Remember how we are trying to come to a realization that understanding the passages should be taking you minimal time, as well as answering the question should take you a minimal time, right? Now, one thing that I need to really stress again is also the background information. The background information that you should have is very important for like questions number 19, right? Number 19, yes, you could find this as you go back, but that will take time. But most notably speaking, or most time critically speaking, you should be able to already know the present state of Colosseum, right? It doesn't say, according to the passage which the following is true about the present state of the Colosseum. It doesn't say, for example, it doesn't really tell you what would be the present state of Colosseum, right? As you see it out there. But it says about the passage, but the passage, of course, it's very much in reality with the present right now, right? So therefore, what you can guess is that, yes, we're talking about the actual Colosseum right there, right now. What's happening? Of course, reconstruction has been happening. They are trying to reconstruct it, or at least they're trying to save the facade by building like a protective, sort of like a protective, sort of like a framework, so that it will stand still. But that doesn't mean that it's still remaining unaffected by the passage of time, or as a result of the earthquake, little of the Colosseum facade remain. Not little, it's a lot of it, notable amount of it still stand, or the Colosseum facade remains intact, but the rest of the structure has been destroyed. Not really, facade is not intact, facade is also destroyed. The only thing that you can say is that much of the Colosseum has been destroyed. Yes, it has been destroyed because of the war, because of the natural disasters, but a notable amount is still standing. Should be the best answer, right? So those are background informations, and you need to be able to use background information in solving the questions, all right? So as you can see here, the social sciences are a little more difficult to solve than any other, I would have to say, because social sciences and humanities involve reality, a theme of reality. So you need to know something about the social studies that they talk about. At least you need to have a good background knowledge into, right, these topics like like Colosseum, or at least 3D computer modeling and what their disadvantages and advantages are, or things like what would be Colosseum looking like right now, or Assyrian palaces, what do they look like, or Roman Senate looks like what, or at least like a Temple of Saturn looks like what. So if you have that idea, if you have at least a background knowledge on these certain stuff, it would definitely help you out in answering these questions, right? I mean, that's what I want you to develop over time. I want you to develop that skill over time and over time and over time. So when you are actually faced with these topics, or at least actually faced with these different passages, you will be able to answer these questions in a very, say, confident and accurate manner. All right, background knowledge, very important. All right, so that's the social sciences. Like I said, it should probably have taken us less than 8.5 minutes to solve all of that, right? Of course, reading everything it's good too, but remember, 8.5 minutes, although it looks quite long, it seems quite long, it's not that long, okay? If you take a look at it, I mean, if you really like measure yourselves, or if you give yourselves time, 8.5 minutes, and try to solve each and every passage, it will be difficult, all right? It will be difficult. It will be difficult to come to 8.5 minute mark. And so what I want you to do is keep on practicing, okay? Keep on practicing and practicing and practicing until you get that 8.5 minute mark, or less than 8.5 minute mark, and that you understand it even when you read, or even if you're reading only the necessary parts of the passages, you should be having a good, or you should be at least grabbing a good idea, or grabbing good sort of like a whole picture out from pointing out the important parts. Okay, so that's what I want you to do. All right, so let's move on to the next and see if we can continue doing this, right? So I'm hoping that you did understand this, right? Okay, so let's move on to the third passage, which is humanities.